I recently had a comment on my channel that said, how can you reach out for help for maladaptive daydreaming if no one can understand it and don't even know what it is? I think that's a really good point, and I wanted to make a video about this because a lot of times in the comments, if people are saying to me they're struggling with maladaptive daydreaming, I'm telling people, oh, you should reach out for help. But I can understand a lot of people feel there's no one to turn to. There's like nobody to speak to. Even professionals don't understand this. It doesn't come up in a lot of places where you look for help. So, and because it can feel to us like it's a kind of embarrassing, difficult to talk about problem, we just feel completely lost. And I wanted to like go back a couple of years to where I was, and actually like the steps that I took and like the dates that I was looking into help, and like what was the journey for me actually getting the help that I got. Because at that time I felt completely the same as the way this person felt, that nobody's going to understand this, that I can't speak to anybody. I was obviously really shy and embarrassed about it. I'd never spoken about it out loud, so I felt, how am I going to bring this up with somebody? I'm not, even if I had a therapist, I wouldn't be able to talk about this because it's too strange and embarrassing and nobody talks about it. First of all, I would say if you're on this channel and you already know the term maladaptive daydreaming, I do think like you are ahead of where a lot of people might be, whereas they just think they've got a problem with daydreaming, maybe even don't recognise it to be that word, and they really don't know who to turn to because they think it's just themselves. I think like once you have that term maladaptive daydreaming, at least you can see online that this is a real thing and that other people struggle from it. So I think armed with that is where you can feel a little bit stronger in the way that you approach somebody. But I still completely understand how difficult it is and how challenging it is to speak about these things when they're not easy to speak about, and when it looks like nobody makes it easier because it's not on the list of things that people deal with. So the first thing, first of all, I'll say I probably came across the term maladaptive daydream around 2021, I would say. So not that long ago, about 4 years ago, and it was really kind of mind-blowing for me that other people had this problem. But I did think that because there was a term for it, like now I can actually look up therapists and see who deals with this. When I did a search back then, there was one therapist. I've got my computer here because I'm going to go through my emails and what I did to get help, so hopefully that can help other people and to see like where I came across barriers to help. So if I put in maladaptive daydreaming therapy just now, therapy, so what comes up? It's just actually like Reddit coming up saying, I've never found a therapist who understands maladaptive daydreaming. What is it and how to stop it? Maladaptive daydreaming, how counselling directory. Okay, so that's something in a counselling directory. But I think if you actually, I think I put in UK because I'm in the UK. So when I put this in 2023, there was one therapist that I found. I can actually see there is another person. I'm not seeing that name that I saw originally. But I'm seeing another person who deals with this, who comes up for them. So basically, you'll find maybe one or two people who mention maladaptive daydreaming on the full list of things that they say that they deal with. So it doesn't appear to be common, and it's not something that all therapists are going to talk about, and that is definitely like where I think everybody is running into problems, because they feel it's just something that therapists don't understand. So the first thing I did was, so this was in January 2023, where I was so isolated, I was so depressed, I was struggling so much with my maladaptive daydreaming. It was truly like unbearable, and I was like, I just need to speak to somebody. I just need to literally get this out of my head and speak to somebody. And I just felt there was nobody in my life I could speak to. It was too embarrassing for that, so I knew I needed to try and turn to a professional. So I in January 2023, the 9th of January, I emailed this one therapist that came up with maladaptive daydreaming, and I said, "Hi, I'm looking for therapy for my maladaptive daydreaming. This is something I've had most of my life but never sought help for. Would you please email me and let me know when you have available sessions if possible?" So that is like my opening question for people. That's what I emailed, and I thought this is going to be the easiest way to try and zone in on a therapist who knows about maladaptive daydreaming. Search for one specifically who mentions it. You know, when I saw her come up and seen that she mentioned that and that she dealt with people who had maladaptive daydreaming, I felt like so happy and so relieved, like, oh, somebody is going to understand me because she's dealt with other people. Like, and then, you know, it makes you feel good that there's other people seeking therapy for the same thing. So I think just like seeing that person's name, it was really, really exciting, and I felt very, you know, I felt like I was about to have a weight off my mind, and, you know, I was about to get the help that I needed. On the 13th of January, she then gets back to me and says, "At present, I'm afraid I don't have any capacity for new clients. However, if this changes, I'll let you know. There may be a slot coming up in the next few weeks, but this is not confirmed." So I never heard back from her. I don't think I responded to that. There would be no point. I never heard back from this person, but I've got to say, I mean, I was devastated at this. I was like absolutely devastated. I was like, okay, what do I do now? And it confirmed my fears that there was nobody to help. And I think, you know, if you get a setback like this, you might have the same feeling. So if you've told a therapist about maladaptive daydreaming and they've not understood it or they've not reacted well, then, you know, that is the setback that you're having, and you will need to push through, as you'll see that I've done, looking for other places and alternative things. So that was January 13th. I got that. I just remember feeling completely devastated and completely hopeless. Like a lot of people in my comments have said that they feel like you do feel hopeless because you feel there's nobody to talk to, like nobody will understand this. So I think after that happened, then what I thought was, okay, I won't look for a specific therapist that mentions this. I'll look on a clinic that has a whole list of different mental health disorders or, you know, different problems, and like I'm bound to find it there. So I went to the Priory, which I know is like a big mental health group, or a big clinic, and I went to the mental health A to Z of conditions. So you're thinking, okay, it's got to be in there because it, you know, it is a condition, it's got a name, people are struggling with this, so surely, like, out of everything, like, somebody must mention this. So I scroll through and, you know, there's loads of different things, and of course there's no maladaptive daydreaming. So, you know, again, they've got about 8 different things for eating disorders here, and they've got, you know, really a lot of, you know, quite what I would think would be quite niche mental health disorders, or like not so common mental health disorders. They've got lots of that. So again, this makes you feel, okay, this is not a real problem that people have, because it's not even considered on this like A to Z list. So again, if you come across a situation like this is then going to make you feel bad again. So this is how I felt. But there was a form that I could fill in to ask questions, just a contact inquiry form. And what I did was I contacted them. So I contacted them, I think the 11th of February. So you can see if I contacted that original therapist on the 9th of January, it's taken me really a month to bounce back and think, okay, what am I going to do next? And sort of like get back on the horse of trying to get help. And this is just to show, like, you might face setbacks, but you need to really keep trying, and it's not going to be the end, but that the setbacks are painful, and it is painful every time you feel misunderstood or you feel that nobody's there to help. You know, it just can't be avoided. That is painful. So this took me like a month to get over. So I had decided I wanted therapy for maladaptive daydreaming. because of my first setback, I then sat on that for another month, and probably, I can't remember exactly how I was feeling, but I was probably, devastated and depressed and going through a really, really difficult time at that time. So basically on this online form on the Priory, I think I can't remember, there's basically a drop down for the mental health problems that you want to talk about, and of course there was no drop down for maladaptive daydreaming, so I think I put in the inquiry, I'm struggling with maladaptive daydreaming, but I don't know where this goes, I don't know what type of therapy I need. To be honest, I don't know if I think I must have mentioned that. Anyway, they came back with like a sort of standard auto response, just sort of asking for more information. So I put on there, the therapy had a drop down for options of the type of therapy, so that's why I inquired, as I wasn't sure what category to choose for my issue. Please let me know what I should do next. Do I just try to book an online therapy session? So I sent that off to them, and then I believe I never got a response on that. So for me, it was really difficult to push myself out there and fill in that inquiry form. It was then really difficult for me to go back on this email because I just got the auto response. And then when I received no response to this, I felt that I just couldn't push any further at that point. I was like, okay, I think if things are hard, you look for ways in which not to go forward with them. And, you just feel that, especially if you're maladaptive daydreaming, you want to just get lost inside your head. And even though it's a problem and you want to be able to climb out and ask for help, if there are setbacks, I really struggled with this. If there are setbacks, you're really you do struggle to push on. And at this point, I was like, I can't, I couldn't phone up because, I was too embarrassed to speak. And, I just hate the thought of having to go back on an email that's not been responded to and be like, is anybody going to help here? Are you going to respond? So they didn't respond to that, and I gave up on that. But I think what did I do next? I'm trying to think of the dates here. What's the date? Okay, I think I actually moved on from this quite quickly. So I must have obviously decided, I was just going to push on, but I couldn't go any further with what they had there. So what I did was turn to BetterHelp because I saw it everywhere. I, of course, am a small channel. I'm not sponsored by BetterHelp. I'm just talking about them because this is actually what I used. And it has really a lot of benefits for people in our situation. So that's why I'm just going to talk about it freely. So BetterHelp, as you know, is probably everywhere. You probably see it everywhere. You've probably seen a lot of negative stuff about it. I think there is a lot of criticism of it, and there's a lot of skepticism of it because it sponsors a lot of people, it shows up everywhere. People kind of complain about the therapists and different things that I've read. So although I was conscious of BetterHelp, I was always suspicious of BetterHelp, as like you might be. So I was very reluctant to use that. But it reached a point where I thought, I couldn't get the help that I needed in terms of finding a UK therapist, in terms of, going to a respectable clinic. They didn't get back to me. So I just thought, what is the harm? Let me give this a try. So I went on to BetterHelp, and the great thing about BetterHelp is that you get to fill in your problem, and then therapists then match with you. So I presume they look over what you've written, and then they decide if they want to try and take you on. And the good thing about this is they want business. There's a lot of therapists on there, so I presume they want business. So even if they hadn't heard of maladaptive daydreaming, I kind of assume they could then do more research on that, or read into it or learn a little bit more, actually just to support you. Now, what I would say about this is this therapy might not be perfect, but it might just be that little step that you need to get out of your head, because I think, you know, that's really what I needed at that time. I was so lonely, and I you know, the struggle of maladaptive daydreaming was just like, you know, wearing me down every single day, and all I needed really was somebody to speak to, but I had nobody to speak to. So for me, BetterHelp was like a godsend at this time, because it was just like, okay, I can actually write down and explain this, and then a therapist can come to me, and then I'm going to have somebody to speak to. So whether or not this was going to be the person that was going to solve the problem for me, or, you know, whether the therapy was going to work or not, it was kind of, you know, it was not that important as the fact that it was just important for me to know what it was like to speak out loud about this problem, and just to have somebody, just to have like almost like a witness to your problem, because it's a very silent, very invisible problem to have. So I'll just kind of tell you, so they have a form and it asks you different questions. A lot of them, you know, are quite generic, just based on, you know, how you feel in terms of like the depression type scale. But it says like what brings you here, that is the main thing. So I actually said, so I'll just write down here what I said. What I might do is actually, I could just copy and paste this into my description below, in case you want to just copy this if you know you're struggling to put words together. So I've written here, throughout my life I've always been addicted to daydreaming, which I thought of as just a symptom of loneliness and anxiety, but I've recently begun to wonder if it's also a cause of my isolation. Because I have such an active imagination, I become obsessed with something, daydream excessively, and also behave in an addictive way by always consuming what I'm obsessed with. This has been going on my whole life, and I've never thought to get help for it, as I thought this was just how my brain works. But now I'm curious if I could benefit from speaking about it, which is why I'd like therapy. So like for us who are shy, and it's difficult for us to talk about things, it's difficult for us to articulate things, this is amazing, because, you know, we don't need to phone somebody and try to explain like, oh, I can't stop daydreaming. You know, it feels, I couldn't have even got those words out loud at this point. So there was no hope for me like doing anything over the phone. So having this opportunity to just fill this out was amazing for me. And then I'll tell you what then after I said that, then I said there's a condition called maladaptive daydreaming, which I believe explains the way my brain works, but I don't know too much about it. So if any therapists have experience with that, it would be helpful. So you can actually say like, you know, this is what I'm interested in, this is the name of it, this is what I believe it could be, and then say, you know, do you have experience with this? And like the therapist needs to respond to you and what you've said. So it's not like you're going to somebody and then you're going to be hit with like a brick wall of like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So the person who came back to me said, I have some knowledge about maladaptive daydreaming, and I'm aware that it's a symptom, that it can be a symptom of other underlying mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, dissociative disorders, ADHD or OCD. Although I would not describe myself as a specialist in maladaptive daydreaming, I am able to help you look at what are the triggers, what increases, decreases the episodes, what impact it has on different domains of your life, and how to put in some coping management skills so this does not rule your life. So you can see, like for me in my situation there, having had nobody who'd responded to me, having had nobody who would, you know, had the time for me, just this, like literally just somebody saying like, I kind of know what this is and I will help you and we can talk through this. So she says, you know, we will work together to form a bespoke intervention that speaks to your individual needs and therapeutic goals. And then she says, if you think I'm the right therapist for you, I look forward to meeting you. And they make the disclaimer like they can't diagnose people. So she said that because obviously if it turned out that maladaptive daydreaming was a part of another mental disorder, like they couldn't say that. So in my case, that did end up being true, that it did end up being a symptom of OCD for me. She couldn't have said that to me at the time, even through our therapy, even if she'd suspected that. And also, I truly wasn't interested in that at that time. Like, I wasn't interested in an official diagnosis, because my feelings at that time were just like, let me speak about this, let me have somebody understand what I'm going through. And that might be the place where you're at. And I think it's a great first step. So this therapist didn't solve my problems, but it was amazing. It was such a help to have somebody to speak to. So I actually did say to her at the time, what did I say? It says, I'm not looking for a diagnosis, as I've had this my whole life without realising it could be a condition. I'm feeling quite overwhelmed and isolated recently, as it's not something I can talk about with other people. And then she said, and this is nice, and this is a good reminder to people, you know, like that person in the comments about, you know, the importance of reaching out. She says, I'm so happy that you reached out and decided not to suffer in isolation anymore. We're not supposed to do life by ourselves. Sometimes we just need another person to listen with compassion and to filter through the white noise of our self-talk. Have a lovely evening. So for me, being so isolated, to have somebody say that to me, I think probably I cried at this point, because it's just like, I was so bottled up, and I was so in a place where I was just like, there's nobody for me to speak to. You know, I just felt so bad. And the reason I wanted to talk through this is because it might be exactly like where you are just now, or where other people are just now. And, you know, I just want to tell you, even though it feels like there's nobody to reach out to or nobody understands, there are always different options you can take. And like, even if something is not the 100% answer, or not like the best answer, it might take you there. Because interestingly, I had this therapy, and it helped in the sense that it gave me somebody to speak to, but it didn't help solve the problem for me. So it took me, when was it? It would have been, what's this, 2025, 2024. It took me like another year and a half so I think I had therapy for about a month when I realised this is not really helping. It wasn't worth the money for me at that time, because I thought, and it became apparent to me, like, maladaptive daydreaming, for me, I couldn't get rid of it by speaking about it. Like, speaking about it was only so helpful. But I did end that therapy, and I think, you know, I felt a bit of a weight off my mind from having spoken about it. But, you know, a year later, then I was in a really difficult situation again, and it just became like, at that point, so at this point you can see like, I wasn't ready to be diagnosed with anything. I didn't consider medication. I wasn't interested in anything bigger than just like, please let me speak to somebody. By the time it got to, you know, like the end of 2024, I was really like, you know, I was just feeling so bad. I had a complete breakdown. I was just like, I need to find out what's wrong. And it must be something bigger than what can be dealt with in therapy. And I think, you know, had I not done this therapy, and I'd always put off going to see a psychiatrist, but I found out that my work insurance would pay for mental health help. And that's something to think about. Like, if you have health insurance at your work, like, there might be things that you can access that maybe you haven't thought about, because I never thought about that. So it just so happened that I was going to be in a situation where I could see a psychiatrist without it costing me the vast amount of money that seeing a psychiatrist costs. And that was always really the reason that put me off seeing a psychiatrist. So I reached a point where I felt, you know, I need to see a psychiatrist, because I actually want to know. So this now wasn't about, oh, I just need somebody to speak to. It was about actually what's going on in my brain. Like, is it worse than just maladaptive daydreaming? Is it something else? You know, have I just been fighting a losing battle that I can't win, and I need professional help for, and maybe I need medication, or maybe, you know, I need a particular plan. So I eventually did see a psychiatrist, and that was a whole other step of trying to get help when I felt when I felt I, reached my limits of being able to talk about this, I think, I had to go through 3 phone calls in order to get to, you had to speak to the insurance, then I had to speak to the clinic, I had to speak to a GP, I had to speak to a mental health. This is more than 3. So there was actually quite a lot of, actual conversations that were so painful, and, I would just like do them, at lunchtime from work, and I would be crying and be like in a right mess. So, there was another barrier to getting help that I had to push through, and I'm so glad I did. But I suppose interestingly is when I saw the psychiatrist, because I've had this experience of having the therapy, I then knew that therapy wasn't going to solve the issue for me. So I was much more open to medication and to what the psychiatrist's plan for me was. Whereas I think, if I hadn't gone through that therapy, it might have been like, oh, maybe I just like need to talk to you, like, maybe I need to do this. Like, I felt like quite confident that I actually had an issue that needed the medication. And I think at that point I felt quite confident it was probably OCD, because I did start to investigate that a little bit in between this. So, I mean, the therapist was completely kind of spot on when she mentioned it was probably a symptom of OCD, and that's not something I knew about at that time. So it wasn't something I was even interested in at that point. But the more I actually looked at OCD, I was like, oh, actually, I think this is actually what the problem is, and like why it's so difficult for me to stop. So I just want to make this video. I hope it's not like so completely rambly, but when I saw this message from this person on my comments, and I feel like such an empathy towards people who are in that place with maladaptive daydreaming, where it just feels there's no one to talk to, no one will listen, no one will understand. I just wanted to show you, I have been there, and I have been in that position where I felt there was nobody to talk to. And it took me, from learning about maladaptive daydreaming to actually getting the help I needed, probably took about 3 or 4 years overall. And now, I'm so glad that I've seen a psychiatrist. I'm so glad I'm getting the help that I am. And I would never, ever have imagined that I could have got that. I honestly thought, I need to live with this for the rest of my life. And I also had this feeling like, oh, I've already dealt with this all through my life, so what's even the point of trying to sort this now? Because, I get I think, if you're used to suffering, you're like, okay, I'll just suffer like this the rest of my life. Like, and you really deserve not to suffer. And there really is help if you find the right help, but don't think that because you have a setback, or because the first therapist you mention this to doesn't have a good reaction, or the first person in your life you mention it to doesn't have a good reaction. I've had so many attempts. I mean, even before the therapy that I'm talking about here, I had therapy before where I just kind of talked about other things, but I talked around the maladaptive daydreaming, so I wasn't even in that place to talk about it yet. But so I hope this has helped, just to kind of show, if you get setbacks, keep pushing, keep reaching out, and actually just to say that BetterHelp is really good for people in our situation who have a problem that is not on the list of most therapists, and is not easily spoken about, and is also sometimes a problem that a lot of therapists don't know about. So that's why I do recommend BetterHelp, because, and again, I'm obviously not sponsored, I'm just talking about it, but I do recommend it for people like us who find it difficult to speak, if that's the position you find yourself in, because it was just so helpful. I hope I've shown that this was so helpful, just getting to write something down, and you can actually just message back and forth with the therapist until you have your actual therapy session. I think actually some therapists, if you don't even want to speak in person, I think some therapists do kind of just therapy over messages, if that is something that would help. So I really hope I really hope this has helped someone, and please do leave any comments or any questions. If there's anything I can do to help as well, just let me know. I really do know how isolating this problem is, and I think that's like the worst thing about it. So yeah, please do like and subscribe if you can, because that helps this video go out to more people. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.